In 1856, on a Louisiana plantation carved by ownership and fear, the overseers dragged Miriam Hol to the great oak and ended her life before anyone could speak her name. By sunrise, the master's family dismissed her death as an inconvenience, ordering Jonas, her husband, back to work as if nothing had happened. They had no idea that before the next dawn, every member of that same family would be hanging from the exact branch they chose for her. The county whispered that an enslaved carpenter had done the impossible, but no one could explain how. No footprints, no struggle, no witnesses, and yet 6 bodies swayed from one tree. What did Jonas Hol do in that single night? And why did the master's own arrogance make it possible? Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The afternoon sun hung low and cruel over Ward Plantation, painting everything the color of dried blood. Jonas Hol walked the dusty path from the mill with his toolbox in one hand, the other wiping sweat from his forehead. His shirt clung to his back. The day had been long, 3 hours fixing the water wheel, 2 more replacing broken gears. His hands ached in that good way, the way that came from work done right. But something felt wrong. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Storm clouds gathered in the west, dark and swollen. Jonas had lived through enough summers to know when weather turned dangerous. This felt different though, heavier. Like the sky itself was mourning something not yet happened. He passed Sarah's garden first. She stood among her turnips, hands frozen mid-reach toward a weed, her eyes fixed on something Jonas couldn't see yet. When she noticed him, she looked away, fast. Too fast.
"Sarah," Jonas said. She shook her head, wouldn't speak, just pointed with one trembling finger toward the main yard.
Jonas walked faster. More people stood in clusters along the path. Field hands who should have been working, house servants who should have been preparing supper. Old Moses sat on his porch steps, head in his hands. Children pressed against their mother's skirts, unusually silent. Everyone looked at Jonas when he passed, then looked away just as quick. Nobody would meet his eyes. The whispers started then, soft voices cutting through the heavy air like knives through cotton. Jonas couldn't make out words at first, just the rhythm of bad news traveling mouth to mouth. Then fragments reached him, didn't deserve it. Said she struck him, the oak. Jonas's chest tightened, the oak. The great live oak that stood in the center of the plantation like a judgment tree. Spanish moss hung from its branches like gray hair. The master's father had hung a man from that tree once, before Jonas arrived. People still wouldn't walk under it after dark. He pushed through the growing crowd. Bodies parted for him. Someone grabbed his arm. Esther, the oldest woman in the quarters. Her grip felt like bird bones. "Jonas," she said, "don't." But he was already past her. The crowd opened completely. Jonas stopped. Miriam hung from the lowest branch of the oak tree. Her neck bent at an angle necks shouldn't bend. Her bare feet pointed toward earth she'd never touch again. The rope bit deep into her throat. Her Sunday dress, the one she'd been so proud of, the one Jonas had traded 2 months of extra work to buy fabric for, hung torn at the shoulder. Jonas's toolbox hit the ground. His knees should have buckled. His voice should have screamed. His hands should have reached for her, but his body didn't obey. He just stood there, staring. The world narrowed to that single image. Everything else, the gathering storm, the murmuring crowd, the plantation house looming white behind the tree, faded into nothing. She was so still. Master Ward's eldest son stood near the tree, flanked by 2 overseers. Charles Ward, 23 years old, soft hands that had never done real work, a smile that never reached his eyes. "Black struck me," Charles said, loud enough for everyone to hear. He touched his cheek where Jonas could see no mark at all. Right across the face, in front of witnesses. Had to be dealt with. Can't have that kind of defiance spreading. Father would have done the same. Nobody spoke. The witnesses Charles mentioned, 2 house servants, stood with heads bowed. Jonas knew them, knew they'd lie if ordered, knew they had families they wanted to keep safe, knew the truth didn't matter when Charles Ward decided what truth was. The head overseer, a thick-necked man named Garrett, stepped forward. "Cut her down," he said to nobody in particular. "Getting dark soon. Storm's coming. Don't need this mess hanging around." Mess. Like Miriam was debris. Like she was a broken fence post or a dead horse that needed clearing before it drew flies. "I'll do it," Jonas heard himself say. His voice sounded strange. Too calm, too steady, like it came from someone else's throat. Garrett looked at him with surprise. "What? I'll cut her down. I'll prepare her for burial." Charles Ward snorted. "Let him. Saves us the trouble." Jonas moved like his body belonged to someone else. He picked up his toolbox, retrieved the knife he used for cutting rope and trimming wood, climbed the ladder someone had left leaning against the oak. The crowd watched in complete silence. Even the birds had stopped singing. He cut Miriam down as gently as he could, caught her body before it fell. She weighed nothing, or maybe he couldn't feel weight anymore. He carried her through the parting crowd toward their cabin. Nobody tried to help, nobody dared. That evening, while thunder rumbled closer and the first raindrops began to fall, Jonas worked. He removed Miriam's torn dress and washed her body with water heated over their small fire. Dressed her in the nightgown she'd embroidered herself, combed her hair the way she liked it, built a simple coffin. From pine boards he'd saved for building them a better table. And while he worked, he hummed the song she'd loved most, the one about crossing rivers and finding rest on the other side. His voice never wavered, his hands never shook. He measured each board twice, cut each corner square, drove each nail straight and true. Outside, the storm finally broke. Rain hammered the roof, lightning split the sky. Wind howled through the quarters like it was searching for something lost. Jonas finished the coffin as midnight approached. He laid Miriam inside it but didn't nail the lid shut yet. Instead, he sat on the floor beside her body. His back rested against the cabin wall, his eyes fixed on the window where he could just see the oak tree's dark silhouette against the lightning-bright sky. He didn't sleep, didn't cry, didn't move except to breathe. He just sat there through the long night staring at that tree. The storm raged, the hours crawled past, the world turned on its axis like nothing had changed. Dawn came slow and gray. The rain had stopped, but clouds still choked the sky. Pale light crept through the window and found Jonas exactly where he'd been all night. Still sitting, still staring, still breathing. But something had changed in his eyes. Something hard and sharp and carefully planned. Something that hadn't been there yesterday when he'd kissed Miriam goodbye and walked to the mill with his toolbox in hand. Jonas rose with the first gray light. His joints protested. His back ached from sitting against the wall all night. He moved like an old man for the first few steps, then straightened, rolled his shoulders, flexed his hands. He looked at Miriam one last time, her face peaceful now. Whatever pain she'd felt in those final moments had smoothed away. He touched her forehead with 2 fingers, a gesture they'd shared every morning when they woke together. Then he nailed the coffin lid shut with 6 careful strikes. The burial would come later. First he had work to do. Jonas stepped outside into the damp morning. Rain had turned the paths to mud. Puddles reflected the gray sky like dirty mirrors. The oak tree stood dark and dripping, its branches still now that the storm had passed. He walked to the tool shed and retrieved his carpenter's box, selected the tools he'd need for the day. The plantation's fence line needed repair near the north pasture. Master Ward had ordered it done before the week ended. Jonas intended to do exactly as ordered. When the breakfast bell rang, he joined the others filing toward the serving house. Nobody spoke to him. They gave him space like he carried something contagious. He took his portion of cornmeal mush and ate it standing, methodically, tasting nothing. From the main house veranda, Charles Ward watched. Jonas could feel those eyes on him, measuring, looking for signs of rebellion, finding none. Good. Jonas wanted to be seen as broken, wanted them to think grief had hollowed him out and left nothing but obedience behind. He kept his shoulders slumped just slightly, kept his eyes down just enough, moved with the careful slowness of someone whose spirit had been crushed. It wasn't difficult to fake. Part of him truly was crushed. But beneath that crushed part, something else had crystallized during the long night, something cold and precise as the carpentry measurements he lived by. He spent the morning repairing fence posts. The work required his full attention, digging out rotted wood, setting new posts level, securing crossbeams at proper angles. He worked slowly, thoroughly, exactly as he always did, but his ears tracked other rhythms, the guards' movements first. 3 men rotated watch on the plantation. 1 stayed near the main house, 1 patrolled the outer fields, 1 rested. They switched every 4 hours. Jonas had known this pattern for years, but never paid it close attention before. Now he counted their steps, noted when they talked to each other, marked the moments. When their attention drifted, the guard near the house, a man named Cooper, left his post twice during the morning. Once to use the outhouse, once to flirt with the kitchen girl who brought him water. Each absence lasted approximately 7 minutes. 7 minutes. Jonas filed that number away. During the midday meal, he ate again without tasting, drank water without feeling its coolness. Around him, conversations happened in low voices. The hanging still dominated every whispered exchange. Some people glanced at Jonas with something like pity, others with fear, as if his presence might draw more violence down on them all. Jonas gave them nothing. No anger, no grief, no reaction at all. After the meal, he was assigned to repair the main house's back door. The wood had swollen during the storm and no longer closed properly. This suited Jonas perfectly. He spent 2 hours working on that door, learning its frame, understanding how the house's structure fit together. The main house had been built 40 years ago by Jonas's hands' predecessors. Good work, but dated. The locks were simple iron mechanisms, the hinges well-oiled but old. The windows on the ground floor had shutters that latched from inside with basic hooks. Jonas memorized it all, not consciously. His hands and eyes simply recorded information the way they always did when he worked with wood and metal. Where joints were weak, where boards would creak under weight, where shadows fell deepest after dark. He noted which rooms held which family members. Master Ward's chambers on the 2nd floor, eastern corner. Charles Ward's rooms directly below, 1st floor, same side. The Master's younger sons, twins 15 years old, shared a room on the western end. The Master's sister and her husband, visiting from Baton Rouge, occupied the guest chambers near the main stairs, 6 people total. Jonas finished repairing the door just as the afternoon light began to fade. He tested it 3 times, making sure it closed smoothly and latched properly. The Master's wife inspected his work and nodded approval. "You do good work, Jonas," she said. Her voice carried that particular kindness white people used when they wanted to feel virtuous, even in your grief. Miriam would be proud. Jonas kept his eyes down. "Thank you, ma'am." She smiled like she'd done something charitable and went back inside. Jonas returned to the quarters as dusk settled. He ate the evening meal, sat on his cabin steps as darkness fell completely. Other people passed him, heading toward their own rest. A few offered quiet condolences. He accepted them with small nods. The night grew deep. Gradually, the quarters fell silent. One by one, candles and firelight disappeared from windows. The plantation settled into sleep. Jonas waited until the moon reached its highest point. Then he rose and moved into shadows. His feet knew where to step to avoid noise. His body knew how to move without disturbing air. Years of carpentry had taught him economy of motion. No wasted movement, no unnecessary sound. He reached the main house as Cooper, the night guard, made his patrol around the eastern side. Jonas counted the man's steps, knew exactly when he'd disappear around the corner, knew exactly how long until he'd return. 3 minutes, 40 seconds. Jonas tried the back door he'd repaired earlier. It opened silently on its well-oiled hinges. He slipped inside and closed it behind him with a carpenter's gentle touch, easing it shut so the latch engaged without clicking. The house's interior darkness held different textures. He could read them. The hallway before him led toward the main stairs. To the left, Charles Ward's chambers. To the right, the kitchen and servants' quarters where enslaved houseworkers slept. Jonas moved left. Charles Ward's door had no lock. Jonas eased it open. The young man slept on his back, snoring softly, one arm flung across his eyes, the other dangling off the bed's edge. Jonas had brought rope, the same hemp rope used for tying livestock. He'd coiled it carefully and hung it over his shoulder. Now he unwound a length with practiced silence. Charles Ward never woke during the binding. Jonas's hands moved with the precision they brought to joinery, efficient, methodical, leaving no room for struggle. When he finished, Charles's wrists and ankles were secured. A cloth gag filled his mouth. Only then did the young man's eyes open, confused, frightened. Jonas met that fear with nothing, no anger, no satisfaction, just the same blank calm he'd worn all day. He moved to the next room, the twins, then the guest chambers, then upstairs to Master Ward himself and his wife. Each binding followed the same pattern. Quick, silent, complete. None of them screamed. The gags prevented that. But their eyes screamed. Jonas saw it and felt nothing. When all 6 were secured, he began moving them, one by one, down the stairs, out the back door, across the yard toward the oak tree. The work required strength, but Jonas had built that strength through years of hauling timber and lifting beams, the rope, the oak's lowest branch, the same branch. Jonas worked without hesitation, without trembling. He'd built scaffolds before, understood leverage and weight distribution. The mechanics came naturally to his hands. He did not watch their faces, did not listen to their muffled protests. Simply performed each action with the same careful attention he brought to measuring boards and driving nails. When it was done, 6 silhouettes hung against the paling eastern sky. Dawn approached with its usual indifference. The world turned. Birds began their morning songs as if nothing had changed. Jonas stood beneath the oak tree, looking up at what he'd made. His breathing came steady and even. His hands hung loose at his sides. The rope's rough texture had left marks on his palms, the same kind of marks hard work always left. He turned and walked back toward the quarters. His footsteps left prints in the mud that rain would wash away by afternoon. The rising sun found him halfway across the yard, moving like a man who'd finished a job and done it properly. Dawn brought screaming. Jonas heard it from his cabin, high-pitched and terrified, coming from the direction of the main house. He sat on his bed's edge, boots already laced, waiting. The screaming multiplied, voices layered over voices, panic spreading like fire through dry grass. He stood and walked outside. Other people emerged from their cabins, confused and frightened. Some looked toward the commotion, others looked at Jonas. Their eyes held questions. He didn't answer. A woman named Sarah ran past, her apron clutched in both hands. "They're dead," she gasped. All of them, hanging from the tree. More people rushed toward the oak. Jonas followed at his own pace, unhurried. The crowd gathered beneath the branches, staring upward. Some covered their mouths, some turned away. A few fell to their knees and prayed. The overseer arrived, shouting orders that nobody followed. He looked up at the bodies and his face went pale. "Who did this?" His voice cracked. "Who?" Silence answered him, but eyes shifted. Glances moved toward Jonas and then quickly away, as if looking at him directly might burn. Old Thomas, who'd lived on the plantation longer than anyone, stepped closer to Jonas. His voice came barely above a whisper. "You?" Jonas said nothing. Thomas nodded slowly. "Miriam's tree." The words spread through the crowd like a hymn passed from voice to voice. Miriam's tree. Same branch, same rope. Understanding rippled outward. Some people backed away from Jonas as if he carried plague. Others moved closer, their expressions mixing fear with something that looked almost like worship. A young field hand named Marcus touched Jonas's shoulder. "You done what we all dreamed." His voice shook. "But they going to kill us all for this." Jonas finally spoke. "They were going to kill us anyway." The overseer heard and whirled toward Jonas. "You confessing, boy?" Jonas met his eyes with that same blank calm. "I'm saying the truth. Death was coming either way." The overseer reached for his pistol, but another voice cut through the chaos. "Nobody touches anyone." A white man on horseback approached the oak tree. He rode with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to authority. His clothes marked him as wealthy. Tailored jacket, polished boots, a hat that cost more than most enslaved people would see in a lifetime. The overseer straightened. "Mr. Calloway, sir, I can see what's happened." Thomas Calloway dismounted smoothly. He walked to the oak tree and studied the bodies with the same careful attention Jonas might give a piece of woodwork. His face showed no horror, no disgust, just analytical interest. He turned and scanned the gathered crowd. His gaze landed on Jonas and held there. Something shifted in his expression, not recognition exactly, but appraisal. The way someone might evaluate a tool they just discovered had unexpected uses. "You," Calloway pointed at Jonas, "come with me." The overseer stepped forward. "Sir, I believe he's the one who—" "I said come with me." Calloway's voice carried absolute command. He walked toward the main house without checking if Jonas followed. Jonas did. The crowd parted silently to let him pass. He climbed the main house steps behind Calloway, entering rooms he'd only seen while doing repairs. The hallway felt different in daylight, less threatening, more ordinary. Calloway led him to Master Ward's study and closed the door. The room smelled of tobacco and old paper. Shelves lined 3 walls, filled with ledgers and legal documents. A desk dominated the center, its surface covered with correspondence and account books. Calloway moved to the desk and began sorting through papers. "Sit." Jonas remained standing. Calloway glanced up. A thin smile crossed his face. "Suit yourself." He returned to the documents, selecting several and spreading them across the desk's surface. "Do you read?" "Some." "Then look at these." Jonas approached the desk. The papers were letters, mostly business correspondence. He recognized Master Ward's handwriting on some. Other signatures belonged to names he didn't know. Calloway pointed to one letter dated 3 weeks earlier. Ward was drowning in debt. Cotton prices dropped. His last 2 harvests failed. He owed money to banks in New Orleans and private lenders in Baton Rouge. He tapped another document. "This is a sale agreement. Preliminary negotiations to sell this entire plantation. Land, equipment, and all enslaved workers to a consortium out of Mississippi." Jonas's hands clenched. "Not just sell," Calloway continued. "Liquidate. The buyers plan to break up families, auction everyone individually, maximum profit." He selected another letter. This one details which workers would bring the highest prices. "Your name's on it. Skilled carpenter. Excellent condition. Estimated value, $1,200. The words felt like physical blows. Jonas had known sales happened, had seen families torn apart, but seeing his own value calculated in cold numbers made something crack inside his chest. "Your wife's death, your revenge." Calloway leaned against the desk. It changed nothing about this sale. Those families were going to be scattered regardless. He paused. "In fact, you may have accelerated the process. Without Ward's family, the estate will go to probate. Creditors will seize everything faster." Jonas looked up from the papers. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need you to understand something." Calloway's eyes stayed steady on Jonas's face. "What you did last night was justice, personal justice. But it was small justice. 6 deaths. Satisfying, I'm sure, but incomplete. What do you want?" "I represent a network. Businessmen, political reformers, some sympathetic plantation owners who see the current system as economically unsustainable. We're working to destabilize the most corrupt operations, force sales, redistribute land, create chaos that eventually leads to systemic change." Jonas said nothing. His mind worked through Calloway's words, searching for the trap. "We need someone like you." Calloway's expression remained serious. "Someone skilled, someone who understands plantation operations from inside, someone willing to take risks." He paused. "Someone with nothing left to lose. I don't trust white men making promises." "Smart." Calloway nodded. "Don't trust me. But consider this. Help me sabotage 3 plantations in this parish over the next 6 months, and I'll secure legal emancipation papers for every person currently enslaved on the Ward estate. Legitimate documents, witnessed and recorded." Jonas's breath caught despite himself. "Why would you do that?" "Because chaos serves my purposes. Because freed workers tell stories that spread. Because I need proof that my methods work." Calloway straightened. "And because, unlike most of my colleagues, I actually believe this system is morally indefensible, though I admit that's a secondary motivation." The honesty of that last statement struck Jonas harder than flowery promises would have. He looked back at the papers on the desk, saw his own name, saw estimated values for people he'd known his entire life. "What kind of sabotage?" Jonas asked quietly. "Disruption, property damage, interference with supply chains, nothing that directly harms enslaved workers, everything that weakens owners' economic positions." Calloway moved to the window, looking out toward the oak tree. "You'll work under my supervision. I'll provide resources, intelligence, protection when possible. In return, you provide execution." Jonas stood silent, weighing the offer. Everything in him screamed to refuse, to distrust, to expect betrayal. But the letters on the desk kept drawing his eyes. Liquidate, scatter, maximum profit. Miriam was gone, but hundreds of others still lived, still faced that scattering. "I want it in writing," Jonas said finally. "The emancipation agreement, signed and witnessed before I do anything." Calloway smiled, a genuine expression this time. "I can have documents drawn up by tomorrow." He extended his hand. "Do we have an agreement?" Jonas looked at the offered hand, thought of Miriam, thought of the oak tree, thought of the papers describing human beings as commodities. He shook Calloway's hand once firmly. "We do. I hope you found that story powerful. Leave a like on the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. I have handpicked 2 stories for you that are even more powerful. Have a great day.